Donald Trump was most definitely not on the ballot, but he sorta, kinda was.
The Trump factor.
He is looming large over everything.
Voters across the country heading to the polls in what will amount to the first referendum on Donald Trump's second term.
November 4th was election night in America. Not a presidential election, because we had one of those last year, but the first major elections across the United States since the election that put Donald Trump in power.
The off-year election does not feature presidential or congressional races. They do serve as early tests for Democratic and Republican strategies.
And so, in races that at first glance might seem to have very little to do with Donald Trump specifically, what you had was a political gauntlet, a series of tests for Democrats who see a path to bringing Trump's White House down by succeeding in far more local races. Let me show you what happened.
And we have some actual votes coming in from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Spanberger is 2,609 votes ahead.
For Democrats hoping for a big night, Virginia was always going to be the first real test, a race for the governorship, but also a race against history for Republicans. Because only once since the Nixon years, half a century ago, have Virginians ever picked a governor of the same party as the current president. You see how they've always flip-flopped. Virginians will elect a Democratic president one year, and literally the next, they'll pick a Republican governor, or vice versa. Every time but one, Virginians seem to signal they are unhappy nationally by voting differently in their state elections. And it's not a stretch to link a state race like this to a national leader like Trump. Take a district like Loudoun County, a part of Virginia where Democrats have just seen a big bump in support since Trump's 2024 presidential victory, and where just across state lines you'll find Washington, D.C. That makes parts of Northern Virginia effectively government towns. Hundreds of thousands of people there either work directly for the federal government or have contracts with federal agencies. And these are people who are directly affected by Trump's downsizing of the federal workforce and the ongoing government shutdown.
Virginia has the second largest total of federal workers in the country. And every worker that's fired or furloughed has a family, friends, neighbors, all of whom are influenced by what's happened.
And there's another side to the election in Virginia with national consequences. Virginia is one of several states that could attempt to gerrymander its congressional map, literally redraw district boundaries in a way that tilts more of the state's 11 congressional districts towards Democrats in the upcoming midterms next year.
In some red states like Texas, they've redrawn their congressional maps to potentially oust some Democrats. So to combat that, bluer states like California and Virginia are doing the same thing.
Democrats picked up 13 seats in the lower house of the state legislature, which means they have an awful lot of room to maneuver when it comes to redistricting the state to squeeze out another 2 or 3 Democratic seats.
I should say, on this election night, there was so much going on. Californians would also be voting on a very similar question called Proposition 50.
Prop 50 is on the ballot. At stake, California's congressional map. The outcome of Tuesday's election could ultimately help decide the balance of power in Washington.
But in order to redraw its boundaries to favor Democrats, California actually needed to ask voters for permission. And last night, in a blue state, it got it.
Californians have voted yes on Prop 50 to implement the state's newly drawn U.S. House map.
So, an important victory for Democrats. But back in Virginia, it took less than an hour from the moment polls closed to the moment all the major networks announced a clear winner.
NBC News can now project the winner of the Virginia governor's race is Abigail Spanberger.
This is an absolute 100% USDA top choice repudiation. Nobody in the White House is walking around high-fiving each other, spiking the ball.
That's a big lead. Don't expect it to stay that wide because the votes that we're seeing coming in so far are in the blue urban Democratic areas.
If Virginia was a race against history for Republicans, this time around, New Jersey was going to be a race against history for Democrats, looking for an incredibly rare three-peat. Not since the 60s has any party won the governorship in New Jersey 3 times in a row. And leading up to election night, Republicans had at least 2 reasons to think Democrats would fall short. In the 2020 presidential election, Biden clobbered Trump here, winning by almost 16 percentage points. But in 2024, that lead shrank in a big way, down to just 6 percentage points. That was the best result Republicans have seen there in 30 plus years. So maybe there's a window for a breakthrough. That's reason number one. But the second reason, look at how close the last gubernatorial race was in 2021. Much tighter margins there too. Except on this night, election night, November 4th, not tight at all.
Democrat Mikey Sherrill is in the lead with 64% of the vote.
Coming into this night, one of the questions was whether or not Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, if she won, would she win by a couple of points? Would it be under 5? And would that be considered a decisive win?
Yeah.
I mean, that is so not even close to the conversation right now.
But you know what was the question? As with the Virginia race, exactly how much of this contest had to do with the candidates for governor and how much had to do with Donald Trump?
And I think the only person that feels that they are in a better spot because of Trump's administration is Trump himself and his billionaire friends.
Now, I don't want to suggest that there weren't local and state issues at play in this election, but this also very plainly wasn't just a state election either.
MAGA's coming for New Jersey with Trump-endorsed Republican Jack Ciattarelli. Trump brags Ciattarelli is now 100% MAGA. We've got to stop him.
Democratic big guns like Barack Obama and Pete Buttigieg were called in, and Donald Trump attended a virtual rally for the Republican candidate. But within an hour and a half of polls closing in New Jersey,
NBC News can project now that Mikey Sherrill is the projected winner of New Jersey.
both the outcome and the consequences were becoming very clear.
If you are a Republican who represents a battleground suburban district, you're looking at Virginia and New Jersey, and you're saying, forgive me, holy shit.
And significantly, Mamdani does have, at this early hour, more than 50% of the vote.
The race to become New York City's next mayor was always going to be the marquee contest of the night. It is, in a big way, because of the city and the candidates themselves. New York City is the largest city in America, a cultural and economic keystone. And this election in particular was unlike what most New Yorkers alive today have ever seen in their lifetimes.
His relentless focus on making the city affordable, talking about things like free buses and rent freezes, really seemed to resonate with voters.
A win for Zoran Mamdani would make him both the youngest mayor New York has seen in more than a century, and also its first Muslim mayor. He also calls himself a democratic socialist, running on promises of universal childcare, freezing rent, making public transit free, hiking taxes on the rich, even a plan to set up a chain of city-owned grocery stores that would set prices lower than the private sector competition.
Every politician says New York is the greatest city on the globe. Well, what good is that if no one can afford to live here?
And leading up to election night, Mamdani was the clear frontrunner.
Winning young voters 75%, winning the black vote by 15 points, 52% for Mamdani.
More than 2 million New Yorkers have voted. That is the most since 1969.
This, by the way, is despite Donald Trump's efforts to undermine him, both directly through Truth Social posts like this, calling any Jewish person who votes for Mamdani a Jew hater and stupid person, and calling Mamdani himself a communist. His record, a complete and total failure. But also this indirect threat of withholding federal funding if municipal voters don't vote the way Trump tells them to vote. It is highly unlikely that I will be contributing federal funds other than the very minimum as required to my beloved first home because of the fact that as a communist, referring to Mamdani there, this once great city has zero chance of success or even survival.
Trump really does see federal dollars as largesse that he should be able to distribute according to his whims. So I don't doubt that he will try to find places where he can cut funding to the city of New York.
But for Democrats watching from Congress, Mamdani's momentum also raised a very important question about what it even means to be a Democrat in the era of Donald Trump.
He's the leader of the Democratic Party?
Let's swear. There is no, who is the leader? Can someone tell me?
So the Democrats heading into 2025 were kind of just like this broken party, desperate for any sources of inspiration.
I think they're looking for him as really the transition maybe for the next generation of Democrats and the next generation of a winning formula for the Democratic Party.
And this question has driven a real wedge through the political left because on the one hand, you have a much more progressive and in a lot of ways much more combative flank in people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders pushing for large-scale change and backing Mamdani.
No, we will not accept an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires run the government.
They scratch his back, he scratches theirs, and the rest of us are left behind.
Then you have the more centrist incrementalists like Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, the former who at no point endorsed Mamdani, and the latter who only did so very late in the game and only after weeks of questions and demands from the party's base.
Since the 2024 election, the Democrats have kind of been wandering. What's the message that they need to put together to hold together lots of different parts of their party? Because the Democratic Party is less cohesive and less, let us say, disciplined than the Republican Party.
I've seen the Democrats described as, right now, looking for their way out of the political wilderness, a party licking its wounds. It's possible, not just Mamdani's win, but his convincing win.
Mamdani decisively took the lead in the mayoral race early in the night and ended with over 50% of the vote.
It's possible this is like jet fuel for the party's left wing, which believes being even more unapologetically left wing is the solution to their current problem. Like Mamdani is a prototype for how to wage an effective campaign.
If anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him.
And I think if you look at the Bernie AOC faction of the Democratic Party, they're going to point to Mamdani and say, this is our vindication.
When you say, well, socialism doesn't work anywhere, these kids say, well, capitalism's not working for me. Somebody's got to do something to help me.
But two thoughts on this. One, what works in New York doesn't necessarily work in the rest of the United States.
Remember, New York City is almost always different. I've been around for many decades. We never looked at New York City to define American politics. I think he's the new face of the progressive socialist wing of the Democratic Party. He absolutely does not represent most Democrats.
But two, as much as you have election observers trumpeting this big blue wave,
History made tonight.
It's worth remembering that Democrats were expected to win all of these races. Polling suggested as much. And if things hadn't gone their way, what a disaster that would have been for a party often seen these days as having no unified direction, no compelling sales pitch, and no effective strategy to unseat Donald Trump.
They don't control the presidency. They don't control either of our chambers of our legislative branch. It's a majority on the Supreme Court, and they seem to be favoring Trump. So it's that combination of, I'll call it, lack of positions of power and lack of a message that really puts the Democrats in the position that they're in right now.
So it's hard to see these election wins as putting Democrats in a clear position of strength. But right now, they may be willing to settle for simply hope.